All right, the pornography industry might be forced by law to follow the tobacco industry path from about 70 years ago when it comes to proving damages, at least in the state of Utah. Republican State Senator Todd Wheeler wants to introduce a new law to allow people to sue internet porn sites if someone can prove in court that they've been harmed by the pornography. So Senator Wheeler sponsored a resolution a year ago declaring pornography as a public health crisis. So joining me now to discuss this a little further, adult film star, actress Chanel Preston. Thank you for being with us today, Chanel. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Now, the proposed legislation in Utah could potentially open the door to serious lawsuits that some critics have said could end up being frivolous or disingenuous. What could this mean for the pornography industry in general?
Well, for one, it vilifies the production of pornography. It leaves us open to frivolous lawsuits. And, you know, pornography is a legalized industry. And so to just leave us open to that is, I think, very irresponsible. It's a little vague, and it's frustrating because it also perpetuates the idea that pornography is inherently bad. And I know that a lot of people feel that way, but then a lot of people also feel that it's not bad. And so it would definitely cause a problem for the porn industry, especially since Utah is one of the largest consumers of pornography.
Now, do you feel like perhaps this is like targeting a small minority of people such as yourself?
Well, I mean, I don't think that it's meant to really target us, but I think people have a lot of misinformation about porn addiction or sex addiction. I think a lot of people get thrown onto that label of porn addiction or sex addiction. And so I think there's a lot of confusion about what it is and what it means. And so I think it causes a lot of, it means a lot of people aren't really getting the help that they need. And I think there needs to be a lot more accurate information about porn addiction and about sex addiction. And I don't think that politicians should be just coming forward and making these claims based off of a lot of times bad science.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up science, and people have a lot to learn, because how about the issue of accessibility to internet porn versus lack of education? Researchers estimate that young people first view porn at the average age of about 11. So in the absence of comprehensive sex ed, do you think pornography has somehow become like a de facto sex ed for young people?
Yeah, I absolutely agree that it has, and people want to blame pornography, but we shouldn't be blaming pornography. We should be blaming the inaccessibility of sex education. I mean, I sometimes compare it to driving. We don't just expect people to get behind the wheel and be good drivers and follow the law if they don't know, you know. And so we're giving young people have access to a lot of mature information or mature imagery, and they don't know always what to do with that information. And so it's not really fair to blame the porn industry. Kids and adolescents and even adults need information about their bodies. They need information about sex. They need information about what porn is, what are fantasies, why do we have them, and they're not receiving that information. So it makes sense that people don't know how to navigate their sexuality or navigate the porn industry, or even just kind of our hypersexual society overall.
And I've just got to ask, I mean, do you think consumers of porn, speaking of, you know, all of this consumer education, as it were, like you said, do you think consumers of porn are perhaps aware of the consequences of their consumption habits? Should they be? Should somebody be there to walk them through this? If it is, like you said, a lack of education on knowing that it might be an addiction.
I I don't think people should be walked through the consequences of watching pornography. I think they should be educated about sex at a much earlier age. We're very capable of making decisions for ourselves, but if we're not given the information or the education, then that's a lot more difficult to do. So no, I don't think people should be walking people through how to use pornography. I think that sort of comes with education about sexuality.
Now, I got to bring up this 2012 study. It examined 168 industry performers. 28% were suffering from one of 96 infections. How can performers be protected if the industry has protested safety measures requiring, say, like the use of condoms, like in California?
Well, first of all, I would check and see where that study was published and if it was peer-reviewed, because there's a lot of statistics and a lot of data out there based off of invalid studies. So the study that I think you're quoting, I would check on that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of bad science, as I mentioned before.
Yeah, that's true. A lot of different numbers. A lot of different places will have different numbers that you look up there. But you know, we do live in a society where people of all ages, I think, are overly exposed to sexual imagery. How do you think that affects people's sexuality? Not the porn. I mean, Victoria's Secret.
Right. Well, I think it can be absolutely very confusing, especially when you don't really understand your sexuality. I understand. I get it. I get being bombarded with sexual imagery and not really knowing what to do with that information, especially when you're really young. Unfortunately, even full-grown adults sometimes don't know what to do with that information because they were really never taught anything about sex. And so they're reaching their own conclusions based off of like stigma, moral judgment, and that's not how we should be doing this. I mean, especially when it comes to porn addiction, it really should be based off of science and not moral judgment. But unfortunately, there's so much of that embedded in the concept of porn addiction that it's really hard to make good decisions around it and give people the help that they need.
And like you said, best analogy of the day, not enough driver's ed for this sort of stuff. Thank you so much for that. That was adult film actress Chanel Preston. Thank you so much.
Thank you.